Beacon Press Audio presents The Cancer Factory, Industrial Chemicals, Corporate Deception, and the Hidden Deaths of American Workers by Jim Morris. This audiobook is narrated by Jeff Zinn, published by Beacon Press Audio, 2023. Introduction. Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon on August 4th, 1992, during a bathroom break from moving furniture, Rod Halford began urinating blood. Not a little blood, sheets of it. It was such a startling effect, he would later testify in a deposition, that I jumped back and the blood went all over. Halford, then living in Youngstown, New York, near Lake Ontario, had the presence of mind to hold his urine stream and ask his wife Nellie to bring him a jar so he could capture a sample. She brought him a baby bottle. Halford called his family doctor, who told him to dump the bottle's contents and report to Mount St. Mary's Hospital in Lewiston, 7 miles away, the next morning. There, Halford gave another urine sample, but a proper analysis wasn't possible. Still too much blood. X-rays were taken 2 days later, and a urologist at Sisters of Charity Hospital in Buffalo gave Halford the results on August 10th. He had a malignant tumor on his bladder the size of his pinky fingernail. The tumor was removed without general anesthesia. Halford had vetoed the idea of being put under and staying overnight in the hospital because, he explained in his deposition, Nellie couldn't drive his pickup truck, which had a stick shift, and I just don't relish hospitals anyway. There was, Halford admitted, some discomfort associated with the procedure. At the time of his diagnosis, Halford was the 18th employee of the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company's chemical plant in Niagara Falls, New York, to develop bladder cancer. Halford had started at the plant as a chemical operator in 1956, become an electrician in 1970, and retired as a janitor at 55 in 1991. His tumor was, to some extent, foreseeable. By 1981, when he was president of Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers Local 8-277, he knew of 4 co-workers with the disease. By 1988, he knew of 8. Federal health investigators invited into the plant by the union found 15 cases of bladder cancer. At this writing, the unofficial tally stands at 78, though that may be an undercount given the challenges of tracking retirees. Some of the victims are dead. Others live with the anxiety of knowing their malignancies, contained by surgery and chemotherapy, could resurface at any time. There's little, if any, doubt about what caused the Goodyear cancer cluster. From 1957 onward, Rod Halford and his co-workers in Niagara Falls inhaled and, more important, absorbed a chemical called orthotoluidine, known internally as Dominic. The chemical was used to make an anti-cracking agent for tires. Halford would come home from work stinking of it. It made his wife gag when she washed his clothes. It seeped through his pores while he slept, leaving a brown stain on the sheets. Documents show its primary manufacturer, E.I. DuPont de Nemours and Company, knew by the 1950s that the yellowish liquid caused bladder cancer in laboratory animals and was protecting its own production workers in New Jersey against exposure. But DuPont either didn't adequately warn its customer, Goodyear, about the risks, or Goodyear didn't listen. Maybe both companies were at fault. That discussion may never be settled. Not large by the standards of its neighbors, the Goodyear plant had a history with chemicals that made it a pernicious, two-headed beast. 11 years before Goodyear started buying orthotoluidine from DuPont and a few other manufacturers, it began using a chemical called vinyl chloride to make a polyvinyl chloride, PVC, a resin fabricated elsewhere, into vinyl garden hoses, shower curtains, siding, and other products. Like orthotoluidine, vinyl chloride is a potent carcinogen, though it targets the liver instead of the bladder. By the time Goodyear closed the PVC side of the plant in 1996, 11 fatal cases of liver cancer had been recorded among its workforce, about 4 times what would be expected under normal circumstances. Few outbreaks of occupational illness in the U.S. have been documented as thoroughly as the one at Goodyear's Niagara Falls factory. Few offer a more striking example of how blue-collar workers were exploited after World War II. Generations of them, starting with the tide of veterans fresh from the battlefields of Europe and the Pacific, eager to ride the surging industrial economy, were misled about the safety of the chemicals they made and used. Men who had avoided death or serious injury in the Hurtgen forest or the jungles of Guadalcanal encountered in workplaces like Goodyear an adversary they couldn't see, one that weakened untold numbers of them over time and lopped years off their lives. This was the bargain they unknowingly struck in exchange for company picnics, Thanksgiving turkey giveaways, and paychecks big enough with overtime to allow the purchase of fishing boats and weekend cabins. Many stayed in the same factory for years and believed what their employers told them. Substance X won't hurt you. Or, in extreme cases, you could eat Substance Y for breakfast and be fine. Employers and their trade associations, we now know, understood the enormity of such falsehoods. The federal government gave this generation of workers almost no help until the late 1960s, by which time some 14,500 of them were dying of traumatic injury each year, and tens of thousands more were being hurt or sickened. The need for a national worker safety law had been recognized at least as far back as the Lyndon B. Johnson administration, but Congress didn't pass one until it was nudged by Richard Nixon early in his first term. The law created the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, a regulatory agency that was starved of resources and vilified from the start. Overwrought critics likened it to the Gestapo and the Spanish Inquisition. Apart from a burst of productivity in the late 1970s, the agency has largely faltered in its attempts to control dangerous substances in the workplace. It has set exposure limits for fewer than 1% of the chemicals ever made or used in the United States, and most of these limits aren't protective. Cancer and other work-related illnesses still take as many as 120,000 lives annually in this country, more than influenza, pneumonia, and suicide combined in 2019, the last full year before the COVID-19 pandemic struck. Another 200,000 to 400,000 people get sick each year from on-the-job exposures. In truth, workers of all races and ethnicities in the United States are victims of legal segregation. They can be exposed to carcinogens at levels 10 to 1,000 times higher than what would be allowed just beyond the plant fence. Niagara Falls, whose population has fallen by more than half since 1960, bet on heavy industry and lost. After World War II, chemical manufacturers flocked to the city and its cheap hydroelectric power. Jobs were so easy to find that, it was said, a worker laid off in the morning could be employed again by afternoon. Then companies began to flee to other states, other countries. With them went the workers and their families. An urban renewal project failed. A toxic waste dump came to personify the city. And Niagara Falls devolved into a den of poverty and crime. It is attempting yet another comeback, having attracted some modest commercial development downtown. Under no plausible scenario will it ever resemble its namesake across the Niagara River in Ontario, a tourist mecca with high-rise hotels, theme restaurants, tidy parks, and the 775-foot Skylon Tower. Niagara Falls is a big shithole, Harry Weist, a retired Goodyear worker, told me as we began a tour of the city one August morning in 2013. It's really repressed. They got idiots.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?